To be honest, I was not very impressed by the New York Times 21st Century Best Books list. Were you?
No, I was not a fan.
That's what we're talking about today on the Life on Books podcast. I'm your host, Tony. With me, as always, is Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead. Typically, we will do a reading update, but I didn't read it. I mean, I read a book this week, but I don't have a ton to talk about, and we have 30 books to go over. We're going to go over each of our top 10 picks for the best books of the 21st century, as well as 5 books from the 21st century that we are looking forward to reading. These are not in any particular order, so I tried to kind of put like my best ones towards the end, but
yeah, I sort of did the same,
really
but
ranked.
Yeah, no, not ranked at all.
So
before we get into our list, do you have any more thoughts on the New York Times list? Or
well, before we get into the lists, let me actually say this, a little news update, a little plug. So we've officially created a email list, which you can join. And we are going to send out a newsletter probably once a week, but I would encourage you to click the link down in the description to join because, excuse me, we just have so many huge projects in the works, and the email list will be the first to be notified of when those things are available, and you're more likely to see it. Jeez, you're struggling over there.
I had 5 pieces of pizza this morning.
Brutal. Okay, so, with social media, if I make a post, you may or may not see it if you're a follower. But if you join the newsletter, you for sure will get it in your inbox. And one project I'm actually hoping to have wrapped up and launched before the end of July. So go sign up for the newsletter. Do I have any other thoughts about the New York Times best list? Well, I will tell you that it made me realize that most of the books I've read in my life are between 1920 and 1995, probably.
Yeah.
So when I was choosing my top 10 favorite books from the 21st century, it was actually difficult in the sense that I just haven't read like hundreds,
right?
Maybe dozens,
right.
couple dozens. So that was interesting to me. And I guess it kind of also made me feel like maybe writing just isn't as good anymore,
Yeah.
There's a lot of books that were on the list that I had either read or were familiar with, and I thought, yeah, that book was good, but do I think it's like the best?
Right.
And the other thing, and maybe you can shed some light on this, is what an odd time to put a list like this together. So
yeah,
technically speaking, the 21st century started in 2001, although I think many people say we'll just consider 2000 and onward, which is fine. I'm totally fine with that. But we're in the middle of 2024. So it just felt odd. Like, why wouldn't you wait till 2025 where you're a quarter
6
century?
months? Yeah.
And then when you consider the fact that like the century technically really starts on the one, then we're like only 23 years in. So it just seemed like a weird time. Do you know why they chose to do it now?
I don't.
Do you think it was just like, we need some news?
A slow news week.
Yeah. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the list?
Not a slow news week anymore. Yeah, I was also pretty underwhelmed. I had high hopes after seeing the top, or not the top 20, the first 20.
Sure. They released it in batches, right?
Yeah, they did 20 a day. And, I had pretty high hopes. I mean, Dennis Johnson was on there.
Yeah.
The Sympathizer was on there.
Yep.
Like,
keep going.
I thought, I had an impression that it was going to be, not just like popular fiction.
Right.
And I don't think it totally was, but, I said this to you. I remember I saw a Reddit post, kind of someone had just like shared the list.
Yeah.
So for anyone that didn't have a New York Times account. And one of the comments that I saw was that I really agreed with is there were a lot of books on the list that if you remake the list or do this again in 25 years, probably won't be on it.
Yeah, I also don't know if their list was ranked or, again, kind of like ours, where it's just...
I think it was.
Yeah, so that makes it even worse. So I think Pachinko by Min Jin Lee
It was in the top 20.
was in the top 20. I think it was 15.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, that's not on my list. Solid book. Good book. If somebody said, should I read this? I would say yes. But like, I don't know, man. Would I just be like, this is one of the best books of this century so far? Like, I don't know.
Right.
And I liked it less after reading The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck, because I was like, oh, okay. You kind of just like took that concept and reworked it for Korea instead of China.
Yeah.
In my opinion. The writing is solid. It was an engaging book. I enjoyed it. I would read something else by Min Jin Lee, but I don't know, man. Is it like a top 20 of this so far? I mean, how many books come out a year?
Right.
Thousands.
Right.
You know, I haven't read all of them, but there's got to be something better than what was in that top 20
I
in
agree.
the top 20.
I agree. And I think it was also very like English centered. There wasn't
a lot of translations.
Correct.
That I remember seeing. Yeah.
You know, I don't want to sound like the type of person with certain political opinions, but as everything gets to be more and more woke,
right.
I kind of would have expected more works in translation, and also, the fact that there are so many quality works in translation available now. I was thinking about this on my way over here this morning. Like, I can think of at least 4 publishers that only do works in translation.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not like there's stuff, it's not like they're putting out stuff that, this book was written in the 70s,
right?
And someone finally translated it into English.
I mean, there is some of that.
Yes, there is for sure. But there's also, I picked up a book recently that was originally written and published in Spanish in 2019.
Right.
And the English translation just came out. Like, I think I have a couple of books in my stack and 2 in the stack that I'm going to talk about wanting to read.
You can't see it in any of the camera angles. Well, you can kind of tell in this one, in the main camera with both of us. But your stacks are both taller than mine, and we have the same amount of books. I feel inadequate now because of this. No, I agree. That was very, it was very, very American centered, which is to a degree expected because New York Times is an American publication for predominantly American readers.
Yeah.
So that's fine. But maybe diversify a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think one of the things with like quote unquote woke culture is a lot of times those discussions are in context about people living in America who just aren't white.
Yeah.
Which is like an important topic, and those people have important things to say and have important stories, but you wouldn't say like, oh, I don't need to go to Korea on vacation because I have a Korean American friend. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So their experience as somebody who grew up in America as a person of color or, of a non-white ethnicity or whatever, kind of qualifier that makes them slightly outside of the typical American life. It's just a different experience than what's actually going on in those other places.
Yeah.
So, and that's a big part of works in translation for me is like there's so many cultural differences. I think it makes the books very interesting.
Yeah.
But should we dive into our picks?
Let's do it.
I tried some of my list was influenced by books that I probably would have put on here, but figured you would have on your list. So I tried to avoid that when possible, but I'm seeing now that was not possible to do 100%.
Yeah, just judging off the spines and the covers, we've got at least 2.
Yeah. So I'll kick things off, and we're going to go fairly rapid fire on some of these. I know they're not in any particular order. If there's something you really want to say about a book, we'll dig into it, but we have so many books to go over. So my first book is actually a book that was on the list of the New York Times.
Yes.
So after I just trashed
before we get into our list,
yes.
How many from their list have you read?
I didn't do a hard count, but I think it was only 4 or 5.
Okay.
But for you, it wasn't a ton.
I landed at 11.
Yeah. So I don't think either of us have read a ton from the list, which is, I guess someone might say, like, you guys are trashing this thing. You haven't even read the books. But it's like, well, I also know enough about the books to know that I probably don't want to read them.
Yeah. There were 10 more from the list that because someone on Reddit linked like the gift article so I could interact with it and check stuff off. There were 10 on the list that I marked as want to read.
Cool.
And out of those 10, only one of them is with me today. So
yeah, I didn't really have the time or the desire to sit down and actually go through and tally them, but I think it was only at best half a dozen. So, all right. So the first book on my list, ironically, is on the New York Times list. It is Americanah or Americanah, depending on how you want to say it, by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who's a Nigerian author. This was my pick for Nigeria to when I'm trying to read one book from every country. I read this in 2022, I believe. The type of novel, when I read it, I thought that was good, not mind-blowing, but stuck with me for a long time afterwards. I do tend to think of it quite a bit, comes up in conversation quite a bit. And so in that way, I think this is a good book to demonstrate that sometimes like giving a book a rating immediately after reading it like is not the best indication, because sometimes you need that space to really think about how you feel about a book. So anyway, that's my first pick. Solid book. I was glad to see it on the list. I think it's deserving of being on the New York Times list. So yeah.
Before I pick my first book, I realized this morning when I was making the stack here, there was a book that I thought about putting on my list that would be a good one. And then when I actually made my list, I guess I totally just blanked and forgot.
Yeah.
I just want to shout out The Manifold Destiny of Eddie Vegas by Rick Harsh. It's a very great book. He's got a very unique voice and writing style. The narrative is really interesting. And the way he there's some examination of the history of American violence in there, and especially as it relates to the Vietnam War. So,
very cool. Well, so if you don't know who Rick Harsh is, he's a friend of the show, I would say, and he is the man behind Corona Samizdat, the publisher.
Yeah,
they publish some very unique stuff. And
you've got your first Rick Brick coming in soon.
Yeah,
so
yeah. And
I finally bullied Tony into buying some Corona Samizdat books, everybody.
Rick has got to be one of the most well-read people I've ever come across. And whenever I see that he's commented on a post I've made, I'm like, oh God, he's probably about to like destroy me somehow with like knowledge.
Yeah.
So.
You know what's funny? And here we go. We're 20 minutes in and already tangenting off.
Yeah.
You and I talked about this a lot off the air. I got a lot of heat in the post about 100 Years of Solitude of my pronunciation of Buen Dia, which I probably deserved. I did butcher the pronunciation, so I apologize for that. The only comment that really got to me was Rick's, because I was like, I let Rick down. Like everyone else, I was like, I don't care about you, but I was like,
so
I let Rick down.
I'm glad you brought that up. So there's a couple things. The amount of people who think that I'm you was quite funny, particularly on TikTok. People would be like, dude, I can't believe like you have this many followers or whatever, and like you don't even know how to say that. I was like, that's not me, dude. Like you can just look at my profile photo and see that I'm not the person that said that. Like, which, it doesn't matter that people think that I am. But secondly, it's funny because I noted that you had mispronounced it when you read it, but I did not know if it was you thinking that's how it was pronounced or you simply misspoke, because I misspeak all the time. Even sometimes when I'm recording content for TikTok or Instagram, I'll be editing and I'll be like, I didn't even realize I said this thing this way. And that's completely wrong. And I just leave it because I don't care enough to go back.
Right.
And this show is recorded. We're not broadcast live, but we're recorded live in the sense that we don't do retakes.
And I'm usually half awake.
Yeah. So, and I didn't even really think much of it when I posted that clip. I kind of felt bad after because there were so many comments, but I never thought like, oh, I shouldn't post this because like people are going to roast Andy. I was just like, oh yeah, like whatever. He just misspoke.
Hey, you know what? We got a lot of engagement out of it.
Oh, for sure. For the record, Sharon Stone.
I was going to say, Sharon Stone is a fan.
Sharon Stone is a fan. She commented a little heart eye emoji on that video. I didn't garner the follow, which was kind of a disappointment.
I'm gonna pretend that she wasn't making that emoji towards the book and us talking about the book, and I'm gonna put that in my back pocket as Sharon Stone thinks I'm handsome. Like I back it. I'm just gonna ride that.
I back it totally. It's actually funny because I was just chatting with. I have a group chat with CJ Talks Books, Books Are Sick, Nick Perry, and Kist Reads Books, Michael Kist. And we just kind of like shoot the breeze about making content or just whatever. And we had a discussion about, famous people that have followed or commented. And I don't know if I should put this on there. I'll check. I'm going to check with him before we publicly post this. I might have Caleb edit it out. But Mia Khalifa, who is an adult film star, or maybe former adult film star. Yeah, I actually did not know who she was when he told the group this, when we were having this conversation, but she follows him and she has like 40 million followers on TikTok, which is crazy. And then I had sent these guys a screenshot of somebody that had commented and then sent me a message, and I responded to the message without ever really looking at the username or anything like that. And then I don't know what happened when I was like I think I was looking for a message from somebody else, and I was like, what is this? And I looked at the username, and it was like something racist. And then their whole bio was about being a fan of someone whose name rhymes with Madoff.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, oh God. I was like, block immediately, And I was like, I need to take a closer look at like the people that I'm interacting with sometimes. And then when you sent me the screenshot or message of Sharon Stone commenting, I was like, when did that happen? And I thought it was recent. And I saw that it was a week old and I'd already liked it because I'm just like, oh, somebody commented a heart thing. Oh, they like the post. Just naturally just thank you for the support. Like the comment.
Yeah.
I never looked at the fact it was Sharon Stone.
Amazing.
And then I sent it to those guys, and apparently Nick and his old man are big Sharon Stone fans. So he was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Well, how about that?
Yeah. So anyway,
let's get this shit back on course.
On to Andy's first book.
My first pick, Pay As You Go, Eskor David Johnson. We've obviously talked at length and had Eskor on, so I don't think I need to say much about this book, but I just think, so many of the great books in some way or another are a coming of age tale. And I think Eskor's novel is kind of a much more modernized version of your classic coming of age.
Yeah.
I think anyone, particular around my age, in this housing market hellscape, has the experience of just trying to find an apartment and or a place to live, I should say.
Yeah.
And, getting caught up in all of the other societal woes that affect that. And I think Eskor nailed that. So I think I think unlike a lot of the books on the New York Times list, this will stand the test of time.
Yeah.
At least, going forward, maybe it won't be a book that people talk about 150 years from now we're, on the scale of like a Dostoevsky or a Dickens. But I think this should and will pick up steam and be talked about for quite a bit the next century.
Yeah, I mean, you're saving us some time here because that's obviously on my list as well. I had a feeling you might pick that, but I was like, I have to have it on my list.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with your thoughts, and I will add that it's a novel that has so much for so many people, which I think is difficult to do, but it never feels like it's trying to do that.
Right.
So there's a lot you could unpack about kind of that modern problem of like the housing market's insane and, that kind of modern coming of age story, but it doesn't feel like it was trying to cram that down your throat.
No.
But you could also just read it as like a wildly fun and entertaining and a bit ridiculous novel. Like some of the characters are ridiculous. Actually, I just read Hell's Angels by Hunter S. Thompson, and now I want to talk to Eskor again about his novel because I'm curious if some of the hijinks are inspired by that.
Biker gang, yeah.
Because some of the names of the Hell's Angels from Hunter S. Thompson's book
were
like
ridiculous. I read it years and years ago.
Yeah. So, all right, on to my next pick. These are probably some of the my first pick and this pick are probably the two most popular books that you're going to find on my list today. But this is City of Thieves by David Benioff, who was one of the show writers for Game of Thrones. And this is a historical fiction loosely based on a story that his grandfather told him, I believe. It's about two soldiers in the Russian army during World War II who are tasked with finding some eggs to help their commander, so their commander can bake a cake for his daughter's wedding. So,
all right,
it's wildly entertaining, somewhat brutal in parts. Definitely a page turner. I mean, it's a New York Times bestseller, which for me is usually a pretty big red flag for a book. But this one is solid. And when I think of kind of modern books, that definitely is one I think of.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Up next for me, I don't think I see this one in your stack.
I left this one out because I 100% knew it was going to be on your list, but I would have included it.
It is Same Bed, Different Dreams by Ed Park, friend of the program. Again, same thing as Eskor's book. We've talked at length about it.
Yeah.
Don't think I need to go any further into detail than we already have on the show, but I think there were, it seemed like there were a lot of books on the list that were either historical fiction or just outright nonfiction. And I think Ed did such a good job of straying away from like your standard historical fiction.
Yeah.
I think we talked about the definition, so to speak, of historical fiction when we had him on. So if you want to check that out, go watch that episode. I won't waste the airtime here, but I think he just kind of nailed it. And it's such a well-written book. It's so unique. Similar to Eskor's novel, like you said, it has a lot of things for a lot of different people without ever really feeling forced. So,
yeah, I think everyone should at least consider reading Same Bed, Different Dreams because for a few reasons. One, I think that Korean history, particularly in the context of America's impact on it, is woefully under-discussed in our country and in our public education and even in our private education schools. So, there's a lot that happened in the Koreas that America played a huge part in. The Korean War is known as the Forgotten War, which is like just a kind of devastating label when you think about it, but it's apt because it is definitely forgotten. The structure of the book is incredibly unique. So if you just want something that like from an artistic standpoint, is very new and different and ambitious.
Yeah.
Definitely, that's a good reason to read it. And it's also fictional, but chock full of pretty spot on, accurate historical fact. So, and it's just entertaining. So, so you sniped my pick of Pay As You Go. So I'm going to get you back here with Tree of Smoke by Denis Johnson. By Denis Johnson. He is a 1N Denis. So this book was also on the New York Times list. And again, I think deserving of it. It is a National Book Award winner. I don't know if that means anything to any of you kids out there, but some people might think that's a cool thing to note. We've talked about this book before. We're probably going to talk about it some more after you and I both, or after I read Angels by Denis Johnson. But polarizing book. People kind of either love it or hate it. I'm more in the love camp, obviously, since it's on my list. But what I really liked about it was it felt very Pynchon-esque, but was much easier to read than your typical Thomas Pynchon novel. It's quote unquote about Vietnam, but it's not really.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's a war novel without being
the war,
without being totally about war.
Yeah,
there's definitely scenes in there with firefights or engagement with the Vietnamese armies or what have you, but it's certainly not the combat is not the main focus.
Correct. Very character driven, thematically very strong. So I don't have a ton to add other than that. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I thought it was unique.
Yes, definitely.
So,
right, my next pick, got to have him on here somewhere. Inherent Vice,
you bastard,
by Thomas Pynchon. Did I take another one of yours? Yeah.
I thought you would have gone with because he's got a couple that are in this century, right?
He's got 3 that came out this century, one of which I have not read. We'll get to that later.
Okay.
The other of the 3, I think, is his weakest novel.
Okay.
I mean, a weak Pynchon novel is still a great novel, but I mean, again, with most of the other 2 authors I've picked out, we've talked a ton about Pynchon on the show, so I don't feel like we need to get super in depth with it, but compelling narrative, great characters. That's, I think, something Pynchon has received criticism for, is his less than fleshed out characters in some of his novels. I don't always agree with that, but sometimes I do see where the criticism comes from.
Sure.
But I think the characters in here are great. Like I said, compelling narrative. It's well written. Compared to some of his other work, it's very accessible.
Yes.
But without being like dumbed down. I've seen some people kind of say this is like Pynchon writes genre fiction, which I think is a very reductive and oversimplified categorization, but it's still just a great novel. So I think, I had to have it on here.
So I'll add that the reason I like Inherent Vice and why I think it deserves to be on the list, and just full disclosure, my frame of reference is I've read Inherent Vice and I've read half of Gravity's Rainbow. And I've also, picked up random Pynchon and just opened it up and read a couple pages here and there of random stuff. But consider that Gravity's Rainbow is his most famous and acclaimed work. Inherent Vice is so vastly different of a book, but is still so Pynchon-esque.
Yes.
I think that's incredibly difficult to do.
Yes.
To stylistically and thematically, in a way, write 2 books that are just so distant from one another. And Gravity's Rainbow came out in 1972. 73. What was his first book?
V.
And that came out when?
Early 60s. I forget when.
And this was 07 or 09?
I believe this was 07, right? Because Bleeding Edge was 2013. This is 09.
Okay. So you're talking about a guy who wrote a book 50 years after his debut that still holds up, is still relevant. You know what I mean? It's just, it's such an impressive thing when you consider the diversity between Gravity's Rainbow and Inherent Vice, and the fact that this guy, whose most famous works are from the 50s, 60s to 70s, whatever.
Yeah. So V came out in 1963. That was his debut. Crying of Lot 49 was in 66.
Right.
And then Gravity's Rainbow was 73.
So that's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
I can't think of another author that has works 50 years apart and you're not just like, this new stuff is trash.
Right.
Maybe Cormac McCarthy. That's probably the only other.
I heard his newest novels were pretty good.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Like,
Yes,
like he's another person you can put on the list.
Yes.
But you're talking about, we'll just call it maybe a dozen people.
Right.
Tops. Like,
right.
And couldn't even name them. But yeah, it's a short list, so very impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a work in translation. The Anarchist Who Shared My Name by Pablo Martin Sanchez. This is a deep vellum publication, originally written in Spanish. Pablo Martin Sanchez is a Spanish author. And when I'm doing this Read the World project, it can be difficult sometimes with a country like Spain, because on the one hand, there's lots to choose from, which you would think is a good thing, but then it's like, well, which one do I choose?
Right.
And then you have stuff that's like, and I have not read Don Quixote, but like that's a book that a lot of people read in high school or maybe college, and it's very, very popular and very famous. And so then you're kind of like, well, do I want to count that as I've read a book from Spain? Like,
right.
It's an important book. I wouldn't begrudge anyone from reading it, but you kind of are like, is it really representative of Spanish writing in 2024? Like, I don't know. Maybe it is. Like, maybe the influence and impact was such that it still felt today, but I don't know. I just feel like Count of Monte Cristo is a great example. Like, I'm not counting that as I've read a book from France. Like, yes, I've read books from France, but like I'm shelving that,
Right.
And so this was a good way to read something modern. I think it was originally written in 2018 and then translated in the last couple years. 2012, it was originally written. Mm-hmm. And then it was, it was translated into English in 2018. It was originally published in 2012. So this book is very, very unique. Also a historical fiction. And it's basically about this guy, Pablo Martin Sanchez, who Googled himself and found somebody by the same exact name who was put to death, executed for being a participant in a coup to overthrow the Spanish government in the early 1900s.
The Franco regime, correct?
It probably was, yes.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. There's actually not a lot of talk about the actual regime.
I'm sure.
So that sent this dude down a rabbit hole to like learn about this guy. And then he wrote a book about that guy's life, basically.
Sweet.
And it's told in a dual timeline. So there's both timelines are about the Pablo Martin Sanchez from
the Anarchist.
The Anarchist.
Yes.
But one of them's like him as a child, and one of them is him as an adult. And the two narratives kind of converge at one point. And then the end of the book just blew my mind. So,
all right. Well, I
would recommend.
I do have a copy. I do remember, when you were reading it, thinking like, oh, okay, I'll check that out. And so I will have to move it up the list.
Yeah, it's fun.
My ever-growing list of books to read.
Yeah, it's a fun book. It's a pretty easy read, but it is very literary. So, yeah.
All right.
I didn't put that on there.
Okay. All right.
Because I knew you would have it on there.
Next up, we just talked about him, The Road, Cormac McCarthy. This, I actually, I think when we answered some questions last week, someone had asked like, or we talked about like books we remember reading that like really got us into. I read this a year or two before I read any of the books that I talked about last week, and I remember just being like so blown away by it. It took me a little bit to get into it, just with the very minimalist style. But once I did, it just hooked me, and like I just couldn't put it down. And McCarthy just does so much with so little. There's nothing crazy about the writing. Not to sit here and like diminish Cormac McCarthy's writing, but compared to someone like Pynchon or Wallace, there's not this grandiose style and word choice and things like that. Like,
it's not maximalist.
It's very terse and to the point.
Yeah.
But especially with the context of this novel, it just grabs you and does not let go.
Yeah.
And I mean, just great novel. So, one of the few that I think the New York Times got right.
Do you have this book on your list?
I don't.
I thought that you may or may not.
I think it was a worthy choice for the New York Times.
Yeah.
Certainly would rank it amongst the better books I've read.
Yeah.
Of the 21st century.
It's The Sympathizer, by the way, by Viet Thanh Nguyen.
Not that I've read a ton. I just had 10 more that I think were a little better.
Sure. Yeah. So this, as you mentioned, The Sympathizer was on the New York Times Best Books of the 21st Century list. This came out in 2017 or 2018. Also about Vietnam. Very interesting because it's told from the perspective of somebody that is a member of the Communist Party, but is working undercover for the South Vietnamese on the side of the Americans, which I thought was a very interesting way to tell this story. We don't know the protagonist's name. It's never said. So he is kind of this like shadowy figure, nameless, just like he is the sympathizer.
Right.
Like, as you see on the cover here. And the second book, there is a sequel, The Committed. I believe he's wearing sunglasses,
yes,
which I think is kind of apropos as well. Just a very unique book.
We did an episode on it. We don't need to get
go watch our episode on it if you want to hear our deep thoughts. Oop.
All right, next up for me, this was another one on that the New York Times had on their list. I think they could have ranked it much higher. This was, I said at the beginning of the episode, after seeing the first 20 that they put out, I had high hopes for the quality of the list. When I saw the second installment, I forget where they ranked it, but this book was in between 80 and 61 in their second 20, on the higher side, I guess lower side of that grouping, and seeing where they ranked it and some of the books that they ranked better than this was what kind of dashed my hopes for it being a legitimate list.
Yeah.
I am talking about Septology by Jan Foss.
Is that how you say it, Jan?
I believe so. It's Norwegian. Some people have pronounced it Jan, John, Foss, Fossey. I have no idea. So don't clip this for the real. Just another very kind of weird and interesting novel. You can flip through it to see for yourself.
Didn't he win the Nobel?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you say that? Sorry.
Yeah, I did not. He won the Nobel Prize. There's like zero punctuation throughout the whole novel. And
well, there's commas at least.
There's commas, but I don't think there's a single full stop.
Right. I don't see a period.
And there's paragraph breaks, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But There's multiple characters with the same name. It's got this kind of hallucinatory vibe to it. It's this just very compelling introspection on art and religion and kind of the different paths your life can take. I read this. It's a pretty long book. I think it's about 700 something pages. It is technically 3 novels in one volume. But I read it towards the end of 2023 when I was quarantining with COVID, and it was just a very apt book for that time. Just it kind of has this haunting, hallucinatory vibe to it. It reads very, I don't know if I would say easily, but for a book that doesn't have any full stop, it flows very nicely. And I just think it's a very good novel.
So let me ask you, what are your thoughts on that not using punctuation thing? I know we've talked about it a little bit before, but I think my thoughts on it have evolved.
Well, I'm generally a fan. I'm generally a fan. I love those long sentences. Some of my favorite authors do that. I think it depends on, the stylistic quality of the individual sentences. It takes a lot of work to write a sentence that goes on for half a page to 8 to 10 pages, and not just make it seem like a run-on thought that could have ended a paragraph ago. I think it depends on the context of the novel. I think in the context of septology, where it's kind of the protagonist ruminating about all these things and these different parts and moments in his life and the people that made it up and things like that, it works really well, where you're just kind of the thoughts flow from one to the other. But in general, I'm a fan.
I think I like it less and less the more I read it. I don't know. I think so. I just read Fury by Cloud Mendoza, which doesn't have like quotation marks or anything like that. Obviously, McCarthy is kind of quite famous for not using a lot of punctuation. And his reasoning for it, I believe, was that it clutters up the page. And he was inspired by Joyce, who also kind of did something similar. And then I know that Duck's Newburyport is devoid of a lot of punctuation. And then I think it was Literarily Wendy's video about Duck's Newburyport, where she mentioned that the author of Duck's Newburyport's mom was a university professor that taught Joyce, or was it the father?
It was her father.
And so
he wrote like
he wrote the biography, right?
Yeah, I think it was like the preeminent Joyce biography.
Right. And so to me, it just seemed like a little cliche in a way, like, oh yeah, your dad wrote a biography about Joyce, and so you don't use quotation marks or punctuation.
I'm glad you brought up Duck's Newburyport, because if anyone has listened to us enough or follows me, you know that I have pretty strong feelings against that book.
Sure. Again, a polarizing book.
Yes. The thing about that was I thought the concept of that book was brilliant. It was more so the execution of it.
Yeah, what's the phrase that...
The fact that, to the point where it's not like it's a weird, uncommon phrase. I say it in my day-to-day life, and I shudder a little bit every time.
You get PTSD from Duck's Newburyport?
Yes. I think the idea of this housewife, for lack of a better term, just kind of and the narrative being her inner monologue, ruminating on the anxieties of American life. And we all have those moments where like we get anxious about something, or we get stressed or busy or whatever, and our mind is racing and it just never stops, and one thought flows to the next and it tangents off into something else and things like that. I think turning that kind of style of thinking, into a narrative is brilliant. I thought it could have been a great novel. It was just the kind of repetitiveness of the fact that, like,
Yeah, that would get annoying.
To me, that's not how a normal person thinks.
Sure.
And
I don't think I've ever said that phrase in my inner monologue.
Right. And maybe that's kind of the point, is that this protagonist isn't supposed to be a quote normal person, whatever that is.
Sure, yeah.
But I just thought the execution of the concept was lacking. But
so I guess the way I look at it is, going back to the punctuation thing, is that from an artistic standpoint, I understand the desire to limit the tools you're using. And ultimately, that's just like what punctuation and grammar is about. They're just tools to help you communicate an idea. They exist for a reason, though.
Yeah.
Because they help you to achieve that end.
Yeah.
And so I guess I kind of equate it to, there's a very famous guitar player named Steve Vai, who's like a virtuoso. And I remember reading an interview with him one time, and he was talking about how he would do all these like crazy different exercises to like push his creative boundaries. And so he's like, yeah, one time I only let myself play 2 notes on the guitar for like a week or something like that. He's like, I could, change the speed, all the cadence, the picking style, all this stuff, and I could only play these 2 notes. And I just tried to come up with as many like cool riffs as I could with just these 2 notes. And you're like, wow, that's such a cool and challenging thing to do. I wouldn't want to listen to an album of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I kind of think of it that way, where it's like, I understand what a writer is trying to do by maybe not using some of these tools, because for example, photography is probably another great analogy of this. Like, when you constrain yourself in a way, it pushes your creative boundaries. And so I appreciate that, but sometimes I just feel like it's, like I said, it's a little gimmicky. Cormac McCarthy saying like, oh, it clutters up the page. It's like, not really. It helps me understand what the fuck you're saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't hate it, but I'm kind of like, eh. And then when I heard that about the author of Ducks Newburyport, I thought to myself, that's just too predictable.
Yeah.
Oh, your dad wrote this book about Joyce, and now you're just doing the thing that Joyce kind of did.
I don't think, from the little that I read of Ducks Newburyport, I don't think she was trying to riff off of the kind of Joycean punctuation usage.
Right.
I mean, I haven't read a ton of Joyce, but
Yeah.
I don't think she was trying to do too much there, because I think he tends to, from what I know about Joyce, he uses like a dash
Right.
to indicate dialogue.
Yeah.
Gaddis does that. Gaddis does it very well. There are other authors that do it well.
I don't know if it was just the punctuation though. Like, you know what I mean? Like the stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know. I think it's just there's something unique when it's fine to be inspired or influenced by certain people. Like, that's how art is created. But I always think it's really cool when you talk to an artist, no matter what the medium is, and their influences are nothing you would have guessed.
Yeah.
And they've incorporated something so far from what they're doing And then once they tell you, you go, oh yeah, now I can see that.
Yeah.
I'll give a great example. And again, I always go back to music, but I remember watching an interview with the guitar player from Slipknot, which is a heavy metal band. And he was like, oh yeah, this section of this song right here, he's like, I was totally inspired by Rush.
Yeah.
And like never in a million years would you listen to it and go, that reminds me of Rush.
Well, I remember thinking that when we were talking to Ed about Same Bed, Different Dreams.
Yes.
Because reading it, I could definitely pick up on the larger influences at a whole. Like and part of this is influenced by my just general discussion, through like DMs or whatever with Ed, and knowing what kind of authors he likes.
Andy's in Ed's DMs.
I could tell reading the novel that he's read Pynchon, Gaddis, DeLillo, things like that. I think, and it's not a discredit to Ed.
Right.
But when we were talking to him and he started talking about the like specifics of Gaddis's work that he tried to not mimic, but he was influenced by these scenes within the recognitions.
Yeah.
That, he talked about the dinner party early on in the novel being influenced by the party scenes in the recognitions. That, and maybe that's on me as a reader for not picking up on it, but that was kind of like a little light bulb, like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, I see that now.
Right.
I think we should get on to the rest of our list, but I'll just say this about, some of the more gimmicky stuff. I think the thing about it for me is it depends on the author and it depends on how they do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, whatever your feelings are about Cormac McCarthy and his lack of quotation marks, other general punctuation, I think he does it well. So,
I mean, they're still good books.
Right. I think it was, oh God, what's the first novel? What's the one we read last year?
All the Pretty Horses?
Yes, All the Pretty Horses. There's no quotation in that. It was not long into that novel before I figured out the rhythm.
Right.
And was like, okay, this is a character speaking.
Yeah.
And there are times where it was a little like I had to go back and read a couple lines, but I never got lost. I think if an author has this idea of what they want to do and they execute it well and you don't notice it as a reader, perfect. I think for me, it becomes an issue when I notice it.
Yeah.
When I'm like halfway through a book and I'm like, or not even, and I'm just like, there's no quotations, who's speaking?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When that's when it feels gimmicky, when they're trying to flex their writerly chops.
Right. I think for me, it kind of just begs the question, would this book be worse if it had quotation marks? And I think a lot of times the answer is no. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? So that's just like, then why didn't you put it in there?
The book?
I don't know. Maybe a discussion for another day. Let me think on it more. Like you said, let's move along here. So this is actually not one of my picks, but you have my copy of the book. So
you're going to stand in.
This is Pirate Hunters. Yeah, I needed something to recall my mind. Pirate Hunters by Robert Kurson. But the real pick is Shadow Divers by Robert Kurson, which is also a blue book.
Yeah. And just hold it up and I'll cover the title.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that they were like, wow, Shadow Divers sold incredibly well. Let's make his next book look exactly like it.
Yeah.
So Shadow Divers is a nonfiction. I'd be remiss to not include at least one nonfiction on my list because I do love nonfiction. It's about some deep sea, essentially like treasure divers. They like to go find sunken ships and other things that have been lost to the bottom of the ocean. And they are on the hunt for a supposed sunk World War II German submarine. And if it is where they believe it is, it will be pretty much way closer to the coast of the U.S. than anyone ever thought that German submarines were getting. Just a gripping book. The storytelling is fantastic. The descriptions of the experiences of these divers while they're underwater it will literally make your palms sweat. When people say like, just what's the one book you always love to recommend people read, just a surefire, like you should read this. It's always Shadow Divers. It's approachable. It's fun. It's got some history in it. Just love that book.
Nice.
So, yeah.
All right, we'll save some time. Looks like with our next two, we'll save some time.
Yeah, so you got Tree of Smoke there. I have
Air Vice.
So we've already discussed
Perfect.
those. Oh, and Pay As You Go.
Nice.
We'll skip over that. All right, what's your next one?
My next one, nice brick. We've got The Instructions by Adam Levin.
Yep.
I was very surprised to not see any Levin on the New York Times list. I do think he is kind of carrying the torch of those late 70s, 80s, 90s writers. Like Gaddis, Pynchon, Wallace, DeLillo, and just kind of is a very encyclopedic novel. It's very unique and compelling in the structure, the characters, the writing style. I think it's a very 21st century book.
Yeah.
Something like Tree of Smoke, for example, like it was written in the 21st century, but also if you had told me it was written in the 80s,
Yeah, you would believe it.
I would believe it.
Yep, I agree.
If you told me The Instructions was written in the 80s, I wouldn't believe you.
Gotcha.
So, just a great novel.
Thick boy, too.
Yes. Approachable, though. It not as daunting and demanding as the size would lead you to believe.
Cool.
So,
well, on the polar opposite of length, here's a book that made my short books list from last time. Tinkers by Paul Harding. This was his debut novel in 2012, I believe. Interestingly, I bought this at Gibson's Bookstore, which is a indie bookstore in Concord, New Hampshire, if you're ever in the New Hampshire area.
shout out Gibson's.
Yeah, shout out to
Give us
Gibson's.
some gift cards. Sponsor us.
Sponsor us, Gibson's. And I bought this at the time because it was under the New England authors section, because
Right.
Paul Harding's from Massachusetts. And this did win the Pulitzer, which apparently people have very little respect for, I've found out this week. I made a post about someone had asked us which awards we think best represent our book taste. We kind of said none, but I said, maybe the Pulitzer, I kind of rank up there a little bit. And everyone's like, Pulitzer sucks. Those books suck. And even someone was like, if an author's won the Nobel Prize, that's surefire bad books.
That's dumb. That's dumb.
And I was like, look, I respect everyone's opinion, but that seems insane to me. But look, I don't know. I guess I would have to go down the list and look at the winners, because they don't give Pulitzer Prize for specific books. They give them to authors.
Correct.
I think it's fair. Sometimes I do say this book won the Nobel, and what I mean by that is it's usually quite obvious, the book that garnered the award for the author. But yeah, so anyway, Tinkers is I think Paul Harding is basically as close as we've got to a modern day John Steinbeck. I've talked in other videos on social media about why that is.
I think you talked about that last week too.
Yeah, but just a really unique novel. Again, a book that I read was kind of good, and then years later, I was like, wow, this book really was amazing, and it's got one of my most favorite quotes of all time in it. I don't have it highlighted. Let me read it. Where's my phone? I'll pull it up on the internet. I've done this before on the show, but it's so good, I will read it again. And as the axe bites into the wood, be comforted in the fact that the ache in your heart and the confusion in your soul means that you are still alive. still human, and still open to the beauty of the world, even though you have done nothing to deserve it. In my opinion, this is the best quote.
Yeah.
Just like
great.
that's the best single quote I think I've ever read in any book. It's just so poetic, so brutal. And the whole book is like that.
Yeah.
So, Tinkers, Paul Harding. All right, moving on. You got some thick ones there.
I think we got a little out of order here, but oh well.
That's all good.
My next pick, Baron Venkheim's Homecoming by Laszlo Krasznahorkai. Just a phenomenal novel. It's got his kind of signature style, the long sentences.
Does he use punctuation?
Yeah, tons.
He's the antithesis to Cormac
Well, I mean,
McCarthy.
there are, he has sentences that go on for pages at a time. So we've got tons of commas and semicolons. And
Sure.
I believe he maybe uses quotation marks. I don't remember. I'm not going to look.
I'll look while you're waxing poetic
But,
about it.
It's kind of got that wry, dark humor that he's got. He's well known for. It's dark, kind of ruminates on extinction and the apocalypse and the end of the world.
That book feels great in the hand, by the way.
New Directions knocked it out of the park with this one. Someone pointed it out to me recently, and I don't want to trash them too much because I do love the type of books that New Directions puts out. Some of the physical quality of their newer releases is kind of not so great.
Another victim of capitalism, my friend. It's been expensive to make stuff.
Knocked it out of the park with this. I mean, the red cover of the dust jacket looks great.
Yeah. Loosely, what's this book about?
So it is about Baron Venkheim.
Sure.
He is this baron from this like very well-to-do, prominent Hungarian family, and he has since moved off to Argentina, and he gets sent back home to their town in Hungary because he's just racked up massive gambling debts in Argentina.
And what's the time period?
I want to say like maybe the 80s.
Okay. It's fairly modern.
Yes. Let's see if it says. I think it's still during the Soviet era.
And is this book part of
Thematically,
okay.
Yes, this is so.
It's like a tetralogy or something?
Yeah. So there's Satan Tango, Melancholy of Resistance, War and War, and this book. This is kind of the culminating one.
Do you need to read them in order?
No.
Or you could just pick that up and read it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you would like pick up on some things, but nothing that like you would misunderstand the plot. So anyway, the Baron is coming home, and the townspeople are like convinced he's going to save them because their town is just run down, impoverished, and they're convinced he's going to save them. And I'll just leave it at that.
Cool. Sounds great. I was going to put Melancholy of Resistance on my books I want to read from 21st century, but it's late 80s.
Yeah.
I knew some of his books were more recent, but I wasn't sure on that one.
Yeah,
so.
he's got some ones that were recently written and then recently translated into English, and then some of his others, at least the first two of the four that I mentioned, I don't know off the top of my head when War and War was originally published, but they were originally written in the late 80s and then just recently translated into English within the last like 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I forget which book it was, but there was a book on the New York Times list that was a working translation, and the original was written in 97, and it wasn't translated until after 2000. So, again, it's kind of like, you probably shouldn't have counted that, but I mean, whatever. They can make whatever they want in their list.
Whatever.
All right, you want to do two in a row here?
Sure.
Since we kind of
My next pick, I had to have it, A Bended Circuity by Robert S. Stickley. I've got the Corona Samizdat edition here. Just phenomenal novel. I remember when it when Corona Samizdat was putting it out, and Rick Harsh was talking it up on YouTube and on Instagram and things like that. I don't think he's not the type of guy that would lie about books for just the sake of marketing.
Yep.
But he spoke very highly of it, and I kind of was a little cautious going in. Like, is this going to be as good as he said it was?
Yeah.
And it's just phenomenal. Very unique and imaginative narrative.
Mm-hmm.
The writing is fantastic. Is very humorous. Like, I think we've talked about it on the show before. A lot of times when I'm reading something and I'm talking about how it's funny, like, it's more like clever than humorous. But this was clever, but also had a lot of moments that I was like actually laughing out loud. Very kind of carries the torch of Pynchon's slapstick style.
Nice.
So
love that.
Just a phenomenal book. One of I think my favorite things about it. So it's set in the late 60s, early 70s in primarily in South Carolina, but then kind of in that, I guess, Bible Belt area of the South. And the writing itself almost has this kind of like Southern drawl to it, where
That's cool.
The text just kind of slowly rolls off the page, and it just feels like it's a hot, humid day down on the plantation, and you're just soaking it all in, and it's just sticking to you. He just nailed it.
That's cool.
So I think I'm not surprised that it didn't make it on this list. Fortunately, I wouldn't be surprised if it never makes it on.
Sure.
Unfortunately, Corona Samizdat is not a super well-known publication. It's kind of one of those in the know type things.
Definitely. That's where some of the best art is, though.
But yeah, just a fantastic novel.
Nice. Before I share my last pick, I just wanted to read a message or a comment from our last episode that somebody left, and then I really appreciate it, so I wanted to shout them out. Zach Stevens 2561 said, "I've binged this podcast for the week and really enjoy it. I found Tony through TikTok, and I love that he interacts with us in the comment section. Love the show, guys. So thank you so much for the support. Couple things about that. First of all, I think that both you and I, aside from each other, are devoid of people we interact with on a day-to-day basis who are readers. So interacting with the online book community at large, and then the community that we're building around this podcast is super important to me. I'm sure it is to you as well. Also, in our Discord server where we do our book club, somebody said, "Hey, can you send me a link, an affiliate link for the next book, so you guys can, get a little bit of commission on that." All the links in this video are affiliate links, which means it doesn't cost you extra to purchase the book through that link, but we do earn a very small commission on books. It's usually like $1.50 maybe. So that is an easy way to support the show. Please only buy the book if you were planning on buying the book. Don't just buy it for our sake. But I am very conscious to not do any sponsored posts about specific books. So I do have authors reach out to me and said, "Can I pay you to make a post about my book?" The answer to that question is no, because I want to only give honest reviews and opinions about books. So there's a million other ways I can help you as an author, but that's just not one of them. And if you are a company that wants to sponsor the show, like a publisher, happy to do that. There's publishers that we would love to work with: New York Review Books, New Directions, Deep Vellum, Open Letter, Corona Samizdat. We'd be happy to do collaborations with those people. We will not take payment to talk about a book and say that we like it. But the easiest and freest way to support the show or anything that you or I post on social media is to share it with others. And the reason why this is so powerful is because sharing brings people to the app. So if you are YouTube and you see that Zach shared the video, the episode to Facebook, now people are coming off of Facebook onto YouTube. And they're, even if they're already a YouTube user, which they probably are, statistically speaking, they didn't have the app open. And now they're going and opening the app, which is, YouTube loves that. Instagram loves that. So same thing, when you DM an Instagram video to a friend or you share it to your own stories, Instagram loves that because you're bringing people back into opening the app, and that's what they want. They want you using their product. So if you do like the show, thank you so much for the support. And that's the easiest way to support us, is by sharing the content. Liking and watching and commenting, all that stuff is awesome, but nothing helps like sharing does. So my plug is over. My last pick is War Trash by Hajin. And this did win the Penn Faulkner Award, which many people or multiple people commented on our post about which awards they kind of value. And I'm actually a little ashamed we didn't think of that when we discussed it, because Penn Faulkner is a pretty good award. Usually have some good picks. But Hajin is a writer originally from China. He now lives in America, where he teaches at Boston University. And this is a memoir, a fictional memoir. So it's written like a memoir, but it is a work of fiction, and it's about a Chinese soldier who is fighting in the Korean War, and he gets captured. And the book is really about just kind of like the between a rock and a hard place that a lot of these people found them in when communism and nationalism were kind of at odds in China during the Cultural Revolution. I'm actually a little ashamed of myself that this wasn't on my best opening lines episode, because the opening is, and this is in the prologue, below my navel stretches a long tattoo that says U.S., as in the United States. And it's got a pretty interesting, you eventually find out what the deal with the tattoo is, and it's a pretty interesting story. So War Trash by Hajin, fantastic novel.
Nice. All right, my last pick. I wish I had seen this on the list. I'm not surprised. I'm a little bit less surprised, or whatever. I wasn't surprised to see A Ben and Circuity.
Yeah.
I kind of was hoping, I had a glimmer of hope that this would make it onto the list. I am talking about A Naked Singularity by Sergio de la Pava. Just a fantastic novel. I talked about it when one of our earlier episodes when we did our favorite books. At the time, this was in my top 5. It may have been since pushed out of that, but as I've joked before, the top 5, the top 10 is never really just 5 or 10 books. So this one will always be a favorite of mine for sure. For anyone that didn't watch that episode or doesn't feel like going back to it, it is about a public defender in New York, which Sergio de la Pava was a public defender.
Which is a thankless job.
Yes, which is a general theme of the novel.
It being a thankless job?
Yes.
Yeah.
But he starts to lose his sense of faith in the justice system, and in doing so starts to lose his sense of reality in general. Just and again, similar to Ben and Circuity and the instructions, very encyclopedic. It is very polyphonic. There's a lot of voices from a lot of different characters that they're all very fleshed out and they all have their own unique voice. The dialogue in here is great. It's very funny and witty. There's one passage, I won't dig through it to find it because I don't know where it is, but there's two or three detectives that have brought one of the protagonist's clients in to discuss possibly working for them as an informant. And they're just like asking him if he wants anything to drink. And it turns into this very like Abbott and Costello back and forth about the different options of soda they can get him.
Oh, nice.
And I probably think about it like once a month. It's been 2 or 3 years since I've read this, and I still probably think about that scene.
I love that kind of pedantic dialogue.
Oh, it's just a phenomenally well-written novel, very unique and interesting. So you should read it.
All right, fantastic. So now we are going to discuss 5 books each that we want to read that are from the 21st century. We're going to go a little bit quicker on this. Obviously, we haven't read them, so we don't have as much to say. So why don't we just like...
why don't you go first while I'm...
Yeah, we can just say what the book is and then just maybe give it really quick about why.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start out with a nonfiction. Well, before I say this, actually, not to delay this further, but picking books I want to read from the 21st century was so hard because, like, theoretically, I want to read all of them.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
and especially with nonfiction, it's like, well, looks like a cool book, and that looks like a cool book. But when I really thought about, like, what am I probably going to read in the next 12 months, maybe?
Yeah.
That's what I kind of use as my criteria. So this first one is First They Killed My Father, A Daughter of Cambodia Remembers by Leung Ung. I hope I'm saying that correctly. There's a slight chance that I am.
I think I read that.
You've read this?
I think I read it in high school.
Oh, fantastic. So it came out in 2000, so it's very possible that you did. It's my choice for a book from Cambodia. It is a nonfiction memoir, obviously, about the terrible tragedies that happened there. So,
okay. My first pick, I don't actually have because the English translation is not being published for another couple months. It is another Laszlo Krasznahorkai novel, Hearst 07769.
And when was it published?
I think within the last, I want to say 2018 or 19.
Okay, so it's pretty recent.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to it. The narrative itself it sounds bonkers. So the Hearst is the protagonist. He takes like an adult night class in physics, and with his newfound knowledge of physics, thinks that some sort of disaster is imminent and they will bring the destruction of all physical matter.
Perhaps a bit of a Dunning-Kruger there, maybe.
Yeah, right. So he begins a very aggressive, one-sided correspondence with Angela Merkel.
The president of...
Chancellor, yes.
Chancellor,
yes.
Yeah. Whatever they call him in Germany.
Yes. So it just...
that does sound good.
Yeah, and it's got a kind of a side narrative. Apparently, he works for the character's name is the Boss. He's the head of a local neo-Nazi gang.
Oh, boy.
Who is also a fanatic of Johann Sebastian Bach.
Oh.
And...
What a duality.
Right. And they go on this wild chase because someone has been defacing monuments to Bach.
That sounds incredible, actually.
And I'm very excited for it because it's about 500 pages and is supposed to be a single sentence. So
that might be a deal breaker for me. All right.
Well, I'm excited to see where that one goes.
We shall see. Okay, so my next pick is My Annihilation by Fuminori Nakamura, who's a Japanese author. This might have been on the New York Times list.
It might have been.
As I said, I didn't take that close look at it. This book came out in 2016 and was translated in 2022. I'm a big fan of Asian lit. Japanese lit's great. I like works in translation. And this little blurb on the back: turn this page and you may forfeit your entire life. My Annihilation, a master of literary noir. has constructed a puzzle box of a narrative in the form of a confessional diary that implicates its reader in a heinous crime.
Nice.
So just sounds like a very unique novel.
Yeah. My next pick is The Last Samurai by Helen DeWitt.
I thought that was A Little Life by Hanya
Oh,
Yanagihara.
no. God, no. Gouge my eyes out
I know.
first.
I'm just kidding.
This was on their list. I had talked to a couple people on Instagram that were both glad to see it on the New York Times list and said they thought it could have ranked a little higher. They all said it was a really great narrative and really well written. I picked it up earlier this year.
You got that at the 5 Colleges sale, didn't you?
No, I got that at Gibson's.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool. Do you have anything else you want to add about that?
Not really.
So this is a little bit of an outlier for me. This is Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which is a sci-fi, which I don't read a lot of, but I've heard this is like just an epic book. So I don't really know much more about it than that, but from people I've talked to who are sci-fi readers, they're like, this is a book that pretty much anybody can love.
Get down with?
I actually have an extra copy if you want to borrow it.
I do. Have you read the... Oh, hell yeah.
Maybe we can do it for the book club.
Yeah, or we could just do an episode.
Yeah.
I'm fine with either of that. That sounds dope. This sounds...
I did get a copy of that for
extras.
$1 at the 5 Colleges book sale.
Oh, nice.
So, you can borrow it. Eventually I'll give it away, but
I will definitely take your extra copy for the time being.
Yeah, cool.
All right. My next pick is we got another big boy. The Logos by Mark Da Silva. I think I talked about this a little bit in our year-end recap at the end of 2023. Another recent novel that I've heard a lot of great things about. Some of the people that I've talked to said it's kind of a mix of The Recognitions and A Naked Singularity. So 2 of my favorite novels, characteristic of both. So it sounds great. It sounds, I think, let's see, the unnamed narrator is kind of this obscure artist on the verge of despair. And he's just trying to find something to get paid. And he ends up working with this corporation to design their logos and stuff.
Nice.
So
that's cool. So this next author had a book on the New York Times list, but it was not this book. So the book that made the list was The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and this is Human Acts. Yeah.
Is that calculations and stuff or equations?
They do look like equations, yeah. And I believe this book came out after The Vegetarian, and I don't think is as popular, but still just sounds really crazy. Gwangju, South Korea, 1980. In the wake of a viciously suppressed student uprising, a boy searches for his friend's corpse. A consciousness search for its abandoned body, and a brutalized country searches for a voice. So it sounds pretty far out. I know The Vegetarian is pretty far out as well. So that's one I'm definitely going to read soon.
Nice. My next pick, actually both of my next picks, I was surprised to not see on the New York Times list. First up, Against the Day.
So there was no Pynchon on the list.
None.
That's insane.
None. There was no Pynchon and no Wallace.
Wow. Did he write anything?
Yeah.
In 2000s?
Yeah.
He did?
He had brief interviews with hideous men. I think most of his essay collections came out in the 2000s. Supposedly, Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again might have been in the late 90s, but most of his other essay collections came out in the early 2000s.
Well, so he didn't pass away until 2008. I thought it was 03 for some reason.
No. And then The Pale King, which posthumously won the Pulitzer.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Was,
obviously his last work. So
I think I don't think that got published until 2012.
Gotcha.
I know it wasn't like immediately after his death.
Yeah.
But again, I've talked to a number of people who are like, had he been able to finish this, which is a discussion for a different day, had he been able to finish this, it might have ended up being a better novel than Infinite Jest.
Wow. Okay.
So, like, I was just very surprised to not see some of the more prolific and well-known modern authors not make it to the list.
Gotcha.
But anyway, Against the Day by Pynchon. It is the only Pynchon novel I have left that I have not read. I'm very much looking forward to it. If I had to pick, as of right now, the 5 books I'll mention today that I want to read, if I could only read one of them, it would probably be Against the Day.
Sure. It's one of your favorite authors.
Yeah, and I've read at least one Pynchon novel a year since I read Gravity's Rainbow for the first time. So
nice.
This will probably be 2024's.
So my last pick for 5 books I want to read is Matterhorn by Carl Morlantis, which is a very popular and famous work about Vietnam. I'm on a Vietnam theme over the last 12 months, so had to pick this one up. And I was actually surprised you don't have this one on here. I thought that this might make the cut because I know you also want to read this.
I do want to read it.
I have a copy, right?
I do have a copy, and I do want to read it again. Same thing as kind of the Sympathizer, not putting that on my list. Tried to venture out a little bit more.
Yeah.
I am, obviously, these 3 that I have in front of me were all originally written in English, but I've definitely been on a little bit more of a translation kick lately.
Yeah.
And especially as I was kind of saying in the beginning of the episode, how there's a lot more presses that are putting out, or there's a quick turnaround time between the original publication and the translated publication. Mm-hmm. So obviously you've got the Krasna Horkai, and then my last pick, this is also a Nobel Prize winner, the books of Jacob, or Jakob, if we want to be correct, by Olga Tokarczuk. This sounds fantastic. It is all about Jacob Frank. So
I've heard also a polarizing book.
Yes. So
I heard it's a difficult book.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know you even had a copy of that.
Yeah, I got it forever ago. When I was, I shouldn't say when I was, as if I still don't have this problem, but like I see a big book on Instagram and I'm like, I have to have it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I've gotten a little bit better about just being like, okay, let's read about this big book before you go and buy it. But, when I was kind of a glutton for punishment, which I'm turning back into, but I've seen a lot of great things, heard a lot of great things. I know it is polarizing. I haven't seen as many people criticizing it, or I've seen a lot of praise for it, I should say. So I'm excited to check that out.
So for the listeners, 3 questions. Number 1, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the New York Times best books of the 21st century list? Number 2, what are your top 3 best books of the 21st century personally? And the third question is, what are 3 books you want to read that are from the 21st century? Let us know in the comments.
I'll add a bonus question. How would you compare our list to the New York Times list?
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think of our lists? Do they suck? Are they great? Are they better than the New York Times? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. People are going to share their opinions whether we ask them to or not. So bring them on. I think that's it.
Do we want to announce the next book club pick, since that was just decided?
Yes, the next book club pick is, put it right here, Caleb, Omen Setter's Luck by William Gass. You've read it. You like it.
I'm very excited to reread it.
It's not that long, 300 pages maybe?
300 something. It's certainly not an easy book. I would say difficulty-wise, it is a more challenging read than Hard Rain Falling.
Hard Rainfall is pretty easy though. So.
Yeah, but certainly more accessible than some of Gass's other works.
Sure.
Well, excuse me. Yeah, I'm very much excited to looking forward to rereading it. When we were first discussing, like, even before we talked about doing the book club, and we were kind of like making a list of books that we both have or want to read that would be good for us to just discuss on the air.
Yeah.
That was an early one that I wanted on there. So I think we'll be able to get some good discussion in the Discord or the website, wherever we land, that discussion board.
Yeah.
And then you and I will be able to get a good episode out of it. If anyone is unsure about reading it, whether it's part of the book club or independently on your own, if you go back and check out our favorite quotes episode, I read a bit of a monologue from that.
Yep. That's what piqued my interest about it.
Yeah. So Caleb set up a link to that.
I did the links.
Okay.
He just does the edits.
Someone put a link in there. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, if you'd like to join the book club, comment down below or send me an email, tony@lifeonbooks.com, or you just find me on Instagram, send me a DM, a Life on Books on Instagram. Don't send me a message on TikTok. Their messaging system is whack, and I never see the messages on there. So thanks so much for listening, and you will see us next time.